Hi, Stephen Hand from Staccato in Hobart. I'd like to talk today about True Gardant and particularly about some of the very common faults that I see in it. Now, firstly, how do you form True Gardant? I've come to the conclusion over the years, and my colleague Paul Wagner in Sydney concurs 100% with me on this. He's independently come to the same conclusion, that you can't hold True Gardant too high, you can hold it too low. So I like to have the centre of the basket in line with the centre of my face. The sword slopes down, covers the inside line, it angles down towards the left knee. Now I can hold it either leg forward. I'm quite convinced that where silver doesn't specify which leg forward you are in a guard, he doesn't mind which leg forward you are, and I think that's the case with open fight and True Gardant Fight. Typically I'll have it right leg forward, but sometimes I'll go left leg forward, and it's important when I'm making that transition not to allow the sword, it's a little bit harder to keep the sword covering the inside line, so it's easy to let the sword drift in, and obviously that exposes some of me on the left hand side of the sword. Now, one of the common mistakes that people make is to hold their guard too low and too much out to the left. And if you hold it properly, a downright blow must miss your arm, whereas if you hold it a little bit too low, a downright blow can impact your arm. Okay, and I'll show you that now. I'll show you what happens if Lewis makes a high mandrita or a cut number one or a downright blow, whatever you want to call it, against me holding True Gardant correctly and incorrectly. So I'll start off with correctly. Come over the top and see if you can hit my arm. See how he can't hit my arm without he can't hit my arm without deviating his sword, in which case I'll know that he's doing that and I'll be able to respond. Right. I can then move to deflect his sword. If I hold my sword incorrectly, then he'll be able to attack my arm directly. And once again, if I'm up properly, if he tries to do that same thing, he can't hit my arm without deviating and obviously coming around where I could move to deflect his sword to the outside. Another mistake that people make, which is really, really common when they're starting out, is to do with the transition from open fight to True Gardant. So the correct way you should do it is to come down like so. What a lot of people do is they bring the sword down so the sword's moving to the right. So they do this. Right? Now obviously this has the problem that in the worst case I can actually scoop the person's sword into the side of my head. But even in the best case, at the moment of contact between the weapons, my sword is travelling in the same direction as their sword, and so I'll have no structure and no strength in the parry. Whereas if I do it correctly, I'm coming up in a deflective motion, and I'll show you both of those now. Okay, what I'm going to show you first is how I can come in and deflect Lewis's sword and hit him if I do that transition correctly. So as you see, that works quite nicely. It's a nice sort of deflective beating parry. If I do it incorrectly, then and I bring my hand in, first I'll do it really badly and show how I can drag his sword into my head, and then I'll do it, not quite so badly, and show how there's not really any force in it. Oh, it's just so wrong. Oh. And once again, correctly. Okay, so as you can see, done correctly, it works really nicely. So once again, I drop the hand so the hilt's about eye level. I turn my sword flat, and I pass forward underneath the sword. The last major mistake that I see people making is that when they do this transition, they drop their hand down and bring it back up again. And this is wasted motion. It's structurally sound, but it becomes a lot slower than it needs to be. So once again, the way you need to do the transition, you drop the hand until the hilt's at about eye level, you turn the sword over, and then you pass in underneath Gardant. So basically your hand never drops below the level it has to be in Gardant. The way I see some people doing it is they'll come down and up again, and obviously that takes longer and with the attendant risks of being hit. So I'll show you some of the problems with that now. Okay, so what we're going to show you first is the difference between doing that transition correctly and incorrectly, where it drops down and comes back up again, against a direct attack. And we'll show you how doing it correctly gives you a much better outcome. Now, incorrectly. Oh. And I wasn't able to make a riposte because my parry was... I was able to make the parry, but only just. I'll show you that again, and then show you the last one done correctly. See, I wasn't even really able to. I'm fighting my instinct not to let my hand drop, so I'll try to really stuff this one up. And correctly. And see how much better that flows. Whenever I drop my hand, I just feel like my head is open, and I just want to come back and cover it, and it's all I can do to get the parry in, and I can't even really think about the riposte. Let's look now at what happens if Lewis tries to deceive the parry, which is difficult to do if this response is done correctly, but a good quality fencer such as Lewis can get away with it sometimes. So doing the transition correctly, I've got no difficulty coming back up and deflecting it to the outside. Let's see if what happens if I drop my hand too far. Oh. Once again, I managed to get the parry in, but only just, and there was, no thought of a follow-up on that. I was just desperately trying not to get hit. Let's see it one last time correctly. And obviously from there I could riposte in a number of ways. So, what we've seen in this video is a few things about how to hold the guard. We hold True Gardant. It can be too low, but it can't be too high. It shouldn't be held out to the left because then the arm becomes vulnerable. We shouldn't, when we're making the transition from open to True Gardant, we shouldn't drag the other sword into ourselves. Best case scenario there is that when the other sword hits yours, they're both travelling in the same direction. There's no strength and no structure. And when we're making that transition, the hand gets to the height it wants to be in True Gardant, and then the point just rotates backwards. Okay, we don't drop the hand down and raise it back up again, because that's unnecessary movement. Unnecessary movement slows you down and makes you a less effective fencer. So, a few little tidbits about True Gardant and how to use it. Thanks for watching.